for our clients. But I'm happy to introduce our panelists that all represent product-based companies who have a mobile offering. So starting, we have Andrew Cohen. Andrew is the co-founder and CEO of Brainscape. He developed the first version of Brainscape as an Excel macro to help him study French. I'd love to explain how an Excel macro can help you study French. I'm not quite sure. And later refined his new learning methodology, competence-based repetition, during a master's in education technology from Columbia University. Brainscape is now a multi-purpose and adaptive mobile education platform with more than 5 million app installs to date. Next to Andrew, we have Michael Lindsay. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of 3Ring, a mobile platform to capture and share artifacts from the classroom. Before starting 3Ring in November of 2011, Michael studied history at Yale and Oxford and worked as a consultant. Raised by entrepreneurs, he's always wanted to start his own business, but it was former Oxford classmate and 3Ring co-founder Steve Silvius that provided the focus on education technology. Since founding 3Ring, Michael has had a crash course in education theory, research, and practice thanks to Steve and 3Ring's users. All right, next to Michael, we have Arun. Arun is a senior development advocate at Google. As part of the developer relations team, Arun works closely with Google Apps customers, partners, and independent developers to help build compelling applications and workflows using Google Apps script. And then last we have Paul. Paul Gollash is an experienced business operator, investor, and entrepreneur with 14 years experience building businesses around the world. He is currently the CEO of Voxy, a venture-funded education technology company based in New York that he founded in 2010. Voxy is an experiential learning platform that uses sophisticated mobile and web technologies to teach people English. So let's give a quick round of applause for our panelists. All right, to start things off, I'm going to direct a few questions to different individuals, but I want to throw out the first question. What is the inherent advantage of mobile learning? And we're going to go through each speaker, and they're going to give an advantage and then a disadvantage. And that might be the hard one because, of course, they all have mobile companies, so they're just going to have to get for mobile. But we'll go, and we'll go in opposite order of where we started. So let's start with Paul on the end. What is an advantage and a disadvantage of mobile learning?
Okay, first off, thanks everybody. Thank you for having me here. I think that if you look at distance learning, sort of since the beginning when correspondence courses started, persistence and engagement have been sort of the core problem. Dropout rates at distance learning schools are much, much higher than in sort of the real world. And I think mobile can really solve that problem by virtue of the fact that the device is with you. 24/7. I think we all check our phones about 200 times a day, and they give the ability to push and interact with the user sort of real time where they are. You can keep people engaged for longer, increase time on task, and if you buy into sort of the skill acquisition theory, those two facts should improve efficacy. I think one of the disadvantages that I've seen in mobile, and you're right, there's not a lot because mobile's great. But the ability for people to focus for long periods of time on mobile is something that we've seen in our data that is a little bit problematic. So if you wanted to do a longer form assessment or something that requires a much higher degree of focus, mobile might not be your best product.
Do you think that's because it's the small format platform and they're not a captive audience, or do you think it's Angry Birds that just gave us really short attention spans?
Yeah, I debate that with my head of pedagogy, with my PhD in this stuff all the time. I mean, it could be anything from how casual you are in sort of reclining on your sofa, or how distracted you are driving in your car. I don't know. We haven't quite sussed out exactly the cause of that. I mean, it could just be the screen size, right?
All right, thank you very much, Paul. Next, for Arun, what is an advantage and a disadvantage of mobile learning?
Yeah. You guys hear me all right in the back? All right, A little louder? All right,
Yeah.
cool. So one of the things that we look at is mobile doesn't necessarily mean that the person happens to be mobile. It could just mean that they are holding a mobile device or wearing a mobile device in the case of Google Glass, for instance. So one of the things we announced at Google I/O back in May was this concept of being able to provision apps to Android tablets with one click, at the teacher or department level or district level, being able to distribute to all your students to a tablet they're holding in a classroom. So here, a teacher trying to teach a math equation, they're on a larger screen displaying what the equations work like, but then there are 20 tablets out in the classroom that are all interactive graphs in there. They can kind of fling through it and see what a graph feels like with the equation that's on the screen. So these are platforms that allow for third-party app developers to build these compelling applications that work on mobile devices, but the user doesn't have to be mobile. It could be sort of a group learning experience. It's really exciting. It's if you go to android.com/edu, you can learn more about it. It's sort of a limited rollout of this platform. So that's one of the things that we're really excited about, is that mobile doesn't necessarily mean you're on your couch or you're out and about. It could mean you're using a mobile device in a classroom. A tablet, for instance, uses 20 times less power than a computer. So it not only is it fun and it's multi-touch and all that enabled, it's also cost effective, it's also uses less power, it's got a battery backup, all that good stuff. So we're really excited about the things that mobile enables just from a form factor standpoint. From a disadvantage, I was actually going to say a very similar point around the inherent built-in distractions and the fact that you feel like you're playing with a device that's made for gaming. I think we haven't seen a lot of success metrics around this. It feels right at this point. We're very committed to it, but it's one of those things that, unlike pen and paper, has not been sort of proven, I feel. So that's one of the disadvantages when you're trying to convince newer organizations to this.
And that's a good point. I think back in the day when we had Oregon Trail, they booted the computer into Oregon Trail, and that's all you could do. There wasn't chat or anything else. But now, especially with bring your own device, there's a ton of different things students can be doing, and it is very distracting. So I think that's maybe a training thing to get them to really focus on.
And also a policy thing. So every platform we put out for mobile, it has to come with a laundry list of about 12, a dozen different settings that turns off chat, that turns off Wi-Fi, that turns off Chrome from visiting YouTube links and all this stuff. So it becomes a bit of an overhead, but I think in the pros outweigh the cons here.
Yeah, I think if you think about how NSA has a line into your phone and how the police can tap your phone, teachers should be able to tap it, right? So when you walk into the classroom, it just goes into classroom mode, and there's nothing the student can do about it, but I don't know that would be that lucky. All right, so next we have Michael. What is a benefit and a disadvantage of mobile learning?
Sure. Hi, everyone. 3Ring is a classroom-based tool, and one of the inherent advantages we've seen with being a mobile-focused platform is that for the first time, when you wanted to access a technology platform in the classroom, now we've seen ubiquity, even in some of the poorest communities and some of the most struggling schools. You're able to find a mobile device in the teacher's pocket, perhaps, most likely in the student's pockets, even more so. It means that if there's something that you can deliver a benefit to a classroom, now you're able to deliver that benefit across the spectrum, not just to classrooms that can afford one-to-one $2,000 laptops. One of the inherent disadvantages we've seen, or this may not be an inherent disadvantage, but we've seen that there's a lack of portability of data that's been captured strictly in the mobile sense. It doesn't have that ability to say, here's my piece of paper, or even here's my Word document. The sharing has not gotten to the point where it's as flexible as even on a regular computer, meaning that some important piece of information can stay captive.
Great. And Andrew, a benefit and a disadvantage of mobile learning?
I echo what the others have said about accessibility, and that's probably a theme that you'll hear pop up a lot in this discussion. But I might also add to that personalization. And you can have personalization through a desktop web app, A lot of times, especially with older kids, everybody still has their own computer. But there's something about having your own device that's with you, that's almost like an extension of your brain, and having some part of your learning environment really tied into that makes the learning experience feel more like yours, and you own it if it's designed right. As far as a disadvantage, I think it's sometimes tempting to want to make your mobile or even tablet app do everything that the website does, but sometimes there's stuff that's just going to be easier on a desktop, whether you're talking about uploading files to something or just doing a huge amount of content creation. And the fact that you sometimes have to stop using the mobile device to then go to the desktop and do something is a disadvantage that probably will always persist.
So, Andrew, you talked about desktop being a better platform to some degrees than mobile for certain types of learning. When you design an application or design a mobile experience, what are some of the things you really need to consider for mobile that you don't have to consider as much for the web or for desktop?
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about the ways people are using the device. So starting first with the cosmetic or the user interface part. There are things that you could do on mobile, like pinching and zooming and swiping, tapping, that the desktop version wouldn't have. So number one, taking into consideration what people are just going to be tempted to do with your app and make sure it responds accordingly. But then just in terms of the learning experience itself, keeping in mind that the average mobile phone session, depending on age group, is something like 90 seconds or 120 seconds. So you need to design your product so that it can be picked up and open up right to the screen that the user's going to want to need, rather than navigating through it. So it takes them 15 seconds to even really get started. So short study sessions or usage sessions, and making it really easy for that. Minimal data entry. So whereas on a website it's really easy to pop up a form and say, oh, just fill out these like 3 or 4 fields, no problem. Type tab. On a mobile phone, that's just a pain in the butt. So the less typing you can have, the better. And because it's short bursts of study sessions, it's hard to try to design good study experiences or learning experiences that are going to be constructivist or project-based learning, because you're probably not going to be sitting there for an hour on your device and really wrapping your head around this big, complex, abstract thinking kind of problem. What the mobile phone does tend to be best at in a lot of cases is drill and practice, and I know there's a lot of backlash against that in education. I think there is a component of drill and practice in almost every subject that you might be learning, and if the mobile device can find a way to get that out of the classroom, personalize that, the parts where you just need to drill yourself, do that out. No teacher should ever have to say, who knows the answer to number 7, raise your hand, come write it on the board. That's a waste of everybody's time. So if you can get that personalized learning aspect and the drill into mobile, and then really focus the class time on those collaborative project-based experiences, I think that's really where mobile can shine.
So with Brainscape then, is that a series of flashcards then, that drill and practice to learn different languages?
Yeah, I mean, it can be used in Brainscape's case for languages, for learning your national capitals or science questions. In every case, in say science, you should be learning most of the content through real world experiences. We were just having a conversation earlier that if you're going to be learning photosynthesis, instead of saying, hey, here's how photosynthesis works, kids, you should instead start off with some kind of a real world problem. You're a botanist, and your greenhouse, this one section of plants are dying. Why? And then the kids are, they're trying to figure out how to work. That's all constructivist, and a mobile app, may or may not help for something like that. But where Brainscape comes in is then, now that you've learned this, that doesn't guarantee you're going to remember that stuff forever. And you probably should, if you're going to graduate, you should know these concepts that you've learned. So Brainscape allows you to drill that stuff at your own pace without slowing down your classmates or teammates. And also continue your learning outside of the classroom and things that you want to pursue or know more about on your own, whether it's while you're a student or even afterwards.
Great, thank you. My next question, if you look at a lot of technologies, a lot of communication platforms, you had the town crier, and then from there we went to print, and then we went radio, then we went TV, then we went the internet. And we still have radio, print, TV. We don't have the town crier so much anymore. If you look at other technologies though, like the 8-track or like vinyl, as soon as we were able to go to MP3s, we don't use vinyl, we certainly don't use 8-tracks anymore. VHS, Betamax, but VHS isn't even being used anymore. So my next question for any of the panelists, do you see mobile being the next step in a communication chain, or do you see it able to replace any other types of technology because we are now using mobile?
Well, I think it's an interesting progression that you laid out about the path for mobile, and certainly mobile has advantages over other technology platforms, and we're seeing that from a communication standpoint. We've known that for 25, 30 years since cell phones have started existing. But the question is, are we begging the question, are we saying, okay, this technology is great, therefore everything should be using this technology? Or are we saying, let's use mobile where it's most effective, let's use technology where it's most effective, and not say it's the best technology, therefore it's the only thing that needs to be used?
Yeah, I think, there's like a pretty general trend towards putting more CPUs around you and having different computing functions, doing more specialized tasks. You can think about wearable technology like Google Glass or different things that are used by the client itself, like the wristbands, etc. So I think mobile won't really replace a desktop experience, for example, because I think people are still going to be going to work in offices for quite a while. So in that situation, why wouldn't you want to have a bigger screen, for example? But the way that the mobile devices are right now, screen sizes are sort of up for grabs, right? This 5-inch, 7-inch is really, really difficult to call it a phone or a tablet.
Do you see that there's going to be a decoupling of the processor and the screen? In some degrees, they've stuck the two together, and your monitor is your computer. But if you can have all the processing in your phone and show up at work and just project it on a bigger screen, do we see that trend that might emerge? Arun?
Yeah, that's the point I was about to make. Is the mobile is sort of a confluence of many words, right? So it's personalization, that was pointed out. It's connectivity that was pointed out, and then just having access whenever you have, right? So the biggest screen often you have is the TV or a projector screen. So one of the things that Google's been doing is, so yesterday we announced a device called the Chromecast, which is this little key fob which you can put, it's HDMI based, you plug into your TV or your projector, and then you're able to fling the content that's on your Nexus 4, your small smartphone, to the big screen, and you have sort of a second screen experience that's personalized to your content. So you can log into YouTube and pull up your lecture inventory and run a class, or you can go to a web browser and sort of start playing around with applications there. And we hope that more people will write apps against this technology. So we really think that sort of mobile is just sort of another word for being able to log in wherever you are, connecting and personalizing to who you are, and having that content. So it's no different than, I think, every screen having a login screen where you can just sort of, someone walks out and they log out, and I go in and log with my account, and all my content, all my personalization settings are there. So I really think sort of mobile is not necessarily, does your app run on an Android phone or iPhone? Is it available where your users are? And it could be on a big screen, it could be on a Google Glass, it could be on a watch, right, for wearable computing and all that good stuff. So I think it's an ongoing process, it's not a replacement process.
So you're really speaking to mobility being the most important thing, as opposed to literally being on a smartphone. That actually raises another question. There's, with mobile devices, originally it was entirely native to start off with, and people wrote iOS or Android-based apps. Seem to be in other parts of the world. Certainly, BlackBerry and Windows are trying to hang in there. But not just native applications. A lot of people recognizing the need for mobility. There's been this, surge of responsive design, so that it's, one code base that can then go to web or tablet or smartphone. For any of the panelists, do you advocate responsive design or native programming for your different applications?
I think the answer to that has to be, it depends, and it's probably a much longer technical discussion. But if you want a native app that lives on your phone, you're probably going to want to take advantage of certain things like a large native database where a lot of information lives on the phone and doesn't have to necessarily call the web every single time it goes to a new screen or a new flashcard or something in Brainscape's case. Or if you're taking advantage of nice animations and nice swipe gestures and other types of animation that can't really be done that seamlessly as a web app. But it's very different for every type of company, every type of learning experience, and I think it's a discussion that is made there. I think the bigger thing, kind of also tying into the last question, is there have been great innovations with smartphones, with tablets, glass now, and your information from learning experiences or other experiences is accessed by so many different devices. And I think the biggest innovation isn't actually any of those devices itself, but it's the cloud. The fact that I can be reading a book on my iPad and bookmark something, and then a couple minutes later I'm on my way out, and I open up my iPhone on the subway, and it's on that same page that I was just reading on my iPad. That's amazing, and that's just the beginning of what can be done. Having my life and what I know and what I'm learning accessible by any device that I'm using and switching between. So I don't think it's necessarily an either-or conversation, but it's how can we keep leveraging the cloud so that in a couple years I walk into my house and I tell my ITV, hey, can you turn on my air conditioning, keep playing that song I was listening to in my iCar, and then it asks me, great, done. By the way, how do you say meatball in Spanish? Because you were just studying that yesterday on Brainscape on the iPhone app, and we should be reminding you now. So having all your learning experiences accessible anywhere, I think is more important than what form factor or native versus what that you use.
The cloud is one of the best innovations for mobile, for sure. But one of the realities of the classroom, we'll just get real for a second, is Wi-Fi is not going to be in every classroom. Wi-Fi is not going to be in every place that you want to have teaching and learning happening, field trips or what have you. And the mobile devices we're talking about, the mobile devices in the classroom, are not 3G enabled necessarily. So that's one of the reasons why we think about the difference between responsive websites and native apps. If you want to be able to deliver mobile learning experiences in classrooms and teaching and learning settings, you need to be able to deliver it without Wi-Fi access.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest differentiator is when we go through client requirements, does your app need to be able to work offline? And if yes, native makes a lot of sense. You can, with HTML5, you can cache single pages, but otherwise, if you need your experience to work offline, then you need to go native. That is the biggest differentiator. And then when you need to get into low-level libraries, if you want to work with, the scanners, for gyroscope or accelerometer, some of those lower-level things, obviously native makes a lot of sense too. But if you don't have to work offline, if you don't need to work with lower-level libraries, you don't need to store things on the local data store, then online might potentially be more effective. So we've talked a lot about how mobile is really part of mobility and how things stored in the cloud. I can go from my iCar to my iTV or my Google car to my Google TV, and as a result, it follows me. But then is it that I've got, my smartphone is basically my access into those, because obviously we don't have to log into our Google car and then go log into our Google TV, and those are personalized, I can speak to them. But does our phone become our access into these, and the data stores in the cloud, and I'm simply using the phone as my entry point, my key into it? Or is there some amounts of data, like personalized data? And where I'm going with this is I actually started another company called Via Place, but we watched the movie Minority Report. And there's a scene where Tom Cruise had to take the eyeball out from some physician because he had to get through a bioreader. So he had this eyeball and he's running through the mall, and Gap does a retinal scan of the eyeball and says, hey, Dr. Jones, your blue shirt is in. And we got all fired up as technologists because we said there's no way Gap is going to store our retinal information. It's just not happening, right? Gap is not going to store our biometrics, our fingerprints and stuff. But then we
Google
thought about it. What's that?
I said Google might know.
Google might. We thought about it though, and we thought what's going to happen is I'm going to store my bio information, who I am, and Gap is going to have their data in the cloud and expose that data. And then my key is also my personalization and my filtering, so that I can filter against Gap's inventory or their database to know they happen to have my blue shirt in. So you see from a learning perspective, how do you see the cloud versus mobile and what lives where?
In our experience, especially with classroom-based learning, is things can't live on a mobile device, despite being the device that's in the classroom, because the teaching and learning process doesn't happen only in the classroom, doesn't happen only around mobile. It's something that needs to be shared amongst users. So my cloud, my education data, that's going to be important to me as a student. But guess what? It's also important to my teacher. It's also important to my principal. It's also important to my parents. And if that data is not accessible for the right people when it's needed and where it's needed, then that data is only 5% as useful as it could otherwise be. So you want to be able to have that not just as your personal cloud, part of the broader cloud, part of understanding where that data needs to be most effective for your teaching and learning.
So data ultimately needs to go back to the cloud, and then the mobile device can be a dumb client, which is what we would call it. Particularly if it's web-based views, it's a dumb client pulling in web views which come from the cloud. Or in the case where you need to have some offline use, like the drills, and you want to have the local language there, it can also have some of the content locally. But it's always nicest if your content is also in the cloud and it can pull down and cache locally and can be used and can be updated. So ultimately, it seems like mobile is becoming a bit of a dumb client, but it's also a personalized tool so that users can have their own potential experience as they customize it. One other thing quickly before we get into some Q&A is that we've noticed internationally, we were actually slow as a country to start adopting Wi-Fi because we already had so many landlines. We're really slow to adopt e-payments because we're so used to our credit cards and our checkbooks. Those guys who still write checks in the grocery store. But a lot of other countries, in African countries, they're certainly using feature phones. They don't even have smartphones to make payment transactions. In Asian countries, they're using near-field communication to make payment transactions. What have you noticed mobile learning doing for emerging nations in particular?
So we focus almost exclusively on emerging markets, teaching English to people, sort of the new middle class that's developing in countries like Brazil. First of all, I think someone touched on access and the unprecedented access that the sort of middle classes now have to the internet and to technology through mobile is astounding. As handset prices drop, you just see our user base, the demographics, continue to get sort of more exciting because more people can afford the device itself. In terms of payment, I think you're right that there's it's an easier sell to get someone to pay on their mobile device, but it really comes down, in my mind, to something very, very simple, and this is in every country we've marketed in, which is how many credit cards your platform has on file. Like Google did a really lousy job of getting credit cards on file, and that just dramatically impedes the ability for a user to pay. Apple does a fantastic job. They've had credit cards on iTunes for decades, and it's much easier to pay.
So you're talking about actually having your credit card stored to download apps then?
Any payment gateway, just having your credit card. I think someone mentioned data entry on a smaller screen, touch screen especially, is complicated. Think of what that does to a payment phone. It's difficult. I don't know about you guys, but I would probably punt on making a purchase if I had to type in a credit card every time on on an iPhone, it's much easier to type in the password. Hit enter.
Does anybody see payment happening for content from a learning perspective from the phone? So traditionally we would buy the book for the year, the school system would buy a book. Does anybody see basically microtransactions for education content happening?
I mean, that's how Brainscape makes our money, and it's unfortunately largely in the adult learner market where Brainscape's revenue comes from. So, people preparing for the GRE or the MCAT or learning languages as an adult, and a big part of that is because it's hard for classrooms and teachers, given our existing procurement system. I'm sure these guys can speak to that. To make their own discretionary payments without having to go through larger systems in a lot of cases. So it would be great if whether the procurement system or even Apple and Google can work together to make it easier for if a teacher wants to buy $5 piece of content for 40 people in the class and spend $200. There should be ways that's a lot easier to do given existing budget that's often too tied up in things that they don't actually even want.
So have you found that the initial 99-cent, $5 download or a subscription-based model or an in-app purchase works best for you to unlock content for your users?
For us, it's actually been an in-app purchase for content. I think Paul's had the opposite experience where the free trial and then upgrade to a subscription tended to work better.
The other thing to kind of keep in mind is it also kind of democratizes who can produce the content when there are platforms where, so like for instance, with YouTube, you can now subscribe to content. So if I am a really good cook and I want to run classes on how to make really good French desserts, I can record me cooking it, put it on YouTube, put a price tag on each video, and people could pay me, and kind of Google mediates that. So the nice thing is that I didn't have to invent any technology. All I had to do was create a YouTube account and upload my videos and set a price tag for it, and people could like it. I can change my price if it's too high, too low. So I think it kind of allows micropayments and subscription models allow for more people to create quality content that may not be technologically savvy.
Great, thank you very much. I think we have a couple minutes here. We got a little buffer of time. Are there any questions for any of our panelists? I've got one question. When on the Google Glasses, are they going to make it a transparent background on the card and allow you to position them on the screen so you can overlay digital information on top of the physical world, as opposed to having the card in the corner?
I purposely did not wear my glasses because that's going to be distracting, especially for you guys. So unfortunately, I can't really comment on the feature set and roadmap for Glass. But the goal with Glass is to kind of take the technology out of the world and make it just about you and content, rather than you turning on something and connecting to something and thinking about am I on Wi-Fi or 3G, and just the goal is to kind of make it connected, always on, about you, rather than pulling out something from your phone, turning on a screen, unlocking it, and so on. So given that vision, you can kind of guess some of the roadmap and go from there.
Yeah, we do have it on Mindgrub Labs. We are working with a couple Explorer apps. But that is the one thing that we thought was the most emerging and disruptive potential top technology that Google Glass. I want to be able, we have got an augmented reality platform. I want to layer content over the physical world. The fact that it's confining cards and I can't dynamically delete them is just, it's frustrating. But I know it's beta stuff. So if I can get like a pipe into a feature request list, you let me know. 'Cause I got a bunch. Do we have any questions? Yes.
One of the things that people in EdTech were excited about when mobile first came on the market was the ability to use those devices to gather data for project-based learning and constructive learning, not just use it to study things online, but actually use it in the real world. Are any of you guys doing stuff like that, and you see that as an area of development for mobile?
So that's a question right off of our prep work with Todd. Yes, 3Ring is about capturing content that's generated in classrooms naturally, and most things like project-based learning fit right into that. One of the things I want to say more broadly on your point is the risk that's run when we have 6 panels, all with ed tech people and not with teachers, is the idea that, well, technology is the answer, right? Technology is going to replace everything. That it's the car to the horse-drawn carriage of teaching and learning as we do it, today. But I think asking a teacher, and they would say it's not like that. It's like it's more like a bicycle versus walking. Like you're going to use the bicycle for certain things. It's very helpful, but you're still going to want to walk places. That's not going to change. And in the case of teaching and learning, project-based learning, experiential learning, working directly with teachers, that's the lifeblood of the classroom. And the more you can use technology to enhance that experience, the better off you're going to be in terms of helping the natural pedagogical approaches that are taking the classrooms today.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, 2 other panels, the EdTech startups after this, they're going to absolutely advocate that you must work with teachers. We heard a lot of that in our first What Makes a Good Ecosystem, that you have to be working with teachers and administrators. And then our Learning in the Cloud panel later on, they're going to absolutely advocate that kind of blended is what's making a lot of strides right now. So brick and mortar with the digital on top of it, but not entirely digital and certainly not entirely brick and mortar without digital. So very, very good point. I saw one other question over here.
Yeah, I had a question. A lot of what concerns us is offline capability, because a lot of students, when they go home, a lot of them don't have access. I'm just wondering if any of you were thinking about that to enable like some sort of activity or something that's offline.
Offline, but on mobile devices.
Yeah, I know it's very contradictory.
Yeah, I mean, Brainscape actually works that way. So when Brainscape is used in classrooms, K-12 or university, and people are creating and sharing their own content, so not necessarily buying our stuff, but using it for the free purpose. When you're in Wi-Fi connection or 3G connection, your content is downloaded to your phone, so that if you want to study for the next day, over the weekend, or whatever, completely on your own and not connected, you can, and it'll save all your data locally, and then the next time that you're connected, it'll sync it back up so that your teacher can see, an update of how you're doing, and then even use that information to the previous question to determine, okay, yeah, the kids have been drilling and practicing in Brainscape, but now here's the advanced kids, here's the basic kids. How can we then divide project-based groups based on that? And all that study can actually be done offline until they're back in access.
Great, all right, I think we're at time. At lunch you can certainly pick their brains a little bit more, but let's do one last round of applause for our mobile panel.